Okay, so today we have Naomi Even-Aberle? Okay, my vowels are all off today. Okay, she is the owner and master instructor of Full Circle Martial Arts Academy here in Rapid City, South Dakota. In additional master, Naomi holds an MFA in visual arts, and her artistic process uses performance arts, digital technology, and martial arts practices to explore community building in a contemporary society. Both her business management and her community engagement are embedded within her martial arts philosophy of understanding, establishing learning strategies for the body, mind, and the spirit. With that, let's give it up for Naomi.
So I just want to test this first. Okay. Woo, it works. So good morning, everybody. I don't know about you, but I'm not a morning person, so bear with me for the first couple slides. Thank you for the lovely introduction. My name is Naomi. I'm the owner of Full Circle Martial Arts Academy. We operate here in Rapid City, South Dakota. And I think like most small business people, this was not in the plan at all. I was never going to own a business. I actually moved to Rapid City in 2012 because I got a job here at the Rapid City Arts Council. And I was working about 50 plus hours a week doing visual arts and movements art and film, and I loved it. But prior to moving to Rapid City, I had been training in Korean-based martial arts for about 12 years, and I soon realized that I missed it. And I wanted to do something that would meet that need for myself. So I thought, what better way than to be an educator? So I applied to be an instructor at the Roosevelt Swim Center because like they pay you, right? And I don't have to do all back end work. I just got to show up and teach, which was a lot of fun. I met some amazing people at the Roosevelt Swim Center. We opened up our first class in February of 2012, and we had about 30 kids sign up and some adults. And I was a little surprised because if you don't know this, Rapid City has about 26 martial arts programs already in existence. Wow. That's a lot. Now, some of those, granted, are like in basements and garages. Some of them are in really big storefronts, but that's a huge saturation for such a small market. So I continued to teach at the Roosevelt Swim Center as a paid employee for about a year and a half. And every time we would open up a new session, we would have a wait list of about 10 kids. Now this is where the young brain goes, ooh, each one of those kids represents dollar signs, represents connections that we have to turn down, right? So I started thinking, we've outgrown this space. They don't have any more room for us. They can't move around their other schedule. What if I started to do this on my own? Think about the amount of money I could get more than just being a paid instructor. And I'm being very honest, like this is what my brain did. I was like, instead of getting $5 a student, I'd get $15 a student, right? So we had our last test at the Roosevelt Swim Center when the kids came up. They tested for the white belt and we announced that we're moving. We got a new gym location. We're gonna do it all on our own. And this was all with the permission of the Roosevelt Swim Center. When we came in, every time I had a new idea, I had an amazing supervisor that'd say, well, tell me what you want, Naomi. How can I support you? If it weren't for her, I don't know if I would have taken this leap. So we were growing up. We had a new location, and I had to figure out what the heck that meant. So as an artist, what's the first thing I do? I paint our logo on the wall. I didn't look at accounting. I didn't look at marketing. I was like, ooh, we have a building. I'm going to make some art, right? Because that's how I was trained. Now, I worked here as a director. I knew better than that, but I didn't know how to make the transition as an individual. I'm a business owner. What does that mean? I don't know, running classes. So we opened up this new facility. It was over on East St. Pat, and I literally did my accounting in Excel. It was an income column. It was an expense column. I thought that was pretty good. I got 2 columns. And I used my full-time job to pay for the gym. We were a sole proprietor, which I found out later because at the time I didn't know what that was. And I learned that basically my personal expenses were not separated from my business expenses. So if anything went wrong over here, my family, my wonderful husband, who also paid all my bills, would take the hit. So that's something I learned. We were at this facility for about 2 years, and we started by pricing our classes lower than every other martial arts gym because we just wanted people. Because that's a great marketing strategy. It's not, by the way. I mean, it sort of worked because I didn't really know what I was doing. I was like, a month, 35, people can pay that. We started to get to the point where we were outgrowing our space, and our space was a little disheveled, and we didn't really have the income to sort of update the space to present the storefront that we wanted our customers to see. The quote-unquote product, see, things I've learned, that we were giving was quality, but the space that we were offering it out of wasn't meeting our needs. So I decided that we needed to branch out somehow. We needed to become more visible than just in the space that we were at, so that the classes that we were teaching, the relationships that we were making, became more important than the place that we offered them. I got a really interesting call from Indian Health Services on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and they had some funding for suicide prevention. And they wanted us to come out and do a martial arts program for their kids in Kyle. And I was like, yes, that sounds great. You've got money, right? They said yes. Because again, I was like, ooh, my full-time job pays for this, but it's now getting to the point where the money that I have to pay as an individual and what the business needs is starting to outgrow each other. So we were having these gaps that I wasn't really sure how to fill without stressing either side. So I went out to Kyle for the first day for free class. Everybody was invited. I walk into the gym at the Ogallala Lakota College, and there was a stand of 200 kids. I was by myself. There was like a 5-minute freak out moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to teach 200 kids. And one of the parents who sort of knew me came up to me and said, Naomi, you don't have to teach them all. You just have to explain what you're going to be able to do and how much you can handle. I was like, oh, thank God, 200 kids. So we presented and we let everybody know that we can only service Kyle. So if you didn't live or weren't considered a citizen or a community member of Kyle, then unfortunately the program didn't apply to you yet. And that was my first real step in understanding that we can't do everything. You cannot help everyone if your business is going to be successful and stable. So if I only have the capacity to teach 20 students, I can only teach 20 students until I'm able to get more help. So we were in Kyle for about 1.5 years. It was a really amazing program. I learned a lot about stereotypes and assumptions when you work with communities that you don't live in, and how to develop relationships with customers by just asking them. Most people will tell you what they think, so ask. Although be careful, because sometimes if you ask, they'll tell you what they think. But I was feeling like we needed more, right? So at this point, I'm now working 60 plus hours a week because I became a salaried full-time employee opposed to an hourly employee, which is a fancy way of saying you can work lots of extra time and still get the same amount of money, right? And the gym was taking up about 20 to 30 hours a week. So if you do the math, that's a lot of hours in a week. And I was getting burnt out. I loved what I was doing at the gym. I loved what I was doing here at the Arts Council, but I couldn't do both anymore. I had to decide. And at the end of the day, the thing that I couldn't live without was the gym. But I had no idea how to step away from the stability of a full-time job that provides healthcare, benefits, a consistent paycheck, resources, networking, and how to step out and do this gym. I had customers, not enough customers to pay for healthcare. So I didn't know what to do. So what does every artist do? You look for a residency, a fully paid, fully funded residency that's going to put you in contact with people that are smarter than you, who already know how to do some of this. So I actually received this information from Peter Strong. He's a gentleman that is at Racing Magpie here in town. He said, you should check out National Art Strategies. They have some really amazing community building focused fellowships and residencies that you can apply for. So I applied for a year-long residency called the Creative Community Fellows Residency, and this residency did some really great things. They were very blunt, and they asked you the really hard questions. So the very first day, I feel like a little kid at school. I show up and I'm with all these people from all over the nation, and we're talking about our projects, and I get done with my presentation, and the first question I'm asked is, are you relevant? Does your community even want you? I was like, well, I want to be here, so of course. They're like, no, that's not how this works. So they helped me understand how to survey a community, how to find out if the thing that I love and want to do is needed at a level at which it can be sustainable. Not just, here's this part-time program that I'm running, I make some money, but it's not enough to be full-time. So I started to do some research here in Rapid City. I went back to those 26 martial arts studios that I'd heard about, and I started finding out what's their mission, what makes them different, what form do they offer, how many students do they have, what's their price point and their range. Not because I really wanted to know this information, but I needed to understand the landscape of what the field that I had chosen looked like in Rapid City. So then when I start to ask myself these hard questions, I have research-driven information to make my decisions based on. One of the best things that I learned how to do is we are a for-profit business, but we have the heart and soul of a nonprofit. And I learned this because you have to tell your story as a business owner, right? If you're the only one, that means I'm the accountant and the marketing director. I'm also HR. I do all those things. So I had to know what Full Circle was. I had to know what its heart and core was. So they actually showed us and walked us through how to write a mission, how to write a vision statement, and how to write values. And then how to not only write them, but then look back at the research that you had done in your community and say, does this match community values? So our mission is to cultivate healthy students in body, mind, and spirit by providing space to connect. You'll notice it doesn't say anything about specifically martial arts, because we do more than martial arts. It gives us space to change based on what our community needs. So that was one of the most valuable things that I learned how to do, was to write a mission, vision, and value statement for my for-profit business that helped create an identity that we could then springboard off of. Okay, so the inside was cool. I knew what we were, I knew what our mission was, I knew what I wanted to do, but how do I make the outside match the inside? So this is our old location. By like 2 days, we just finished moving to our new one. But we started looking to find a facility that was, one, bigger and could host more students because we were busting at the seams at our old location. But two, didn't rely on me having complete and full control over the facility because that was a lot of resources I didn't have to give. So I lucked out and I met Andrea Schaefer with Barefoot Dance Studio, and she happened to have a need. She had an empty space in the back that was just like throwing money down the drain, and she needed a renter. And I needed a space and apparently money to throw down a drain. So we moved in with Andrea Schaefer, and it was some weird collaboration at first. I don't know if you know this, but I found out. So these are martial arts mats. They're fairly specific to my career field, and they're about $50 a square. So there's about $3,000 worth of flooring there. That's the biggest expenditure I've ever made with the gym up to this point. And Andrea actually paid for it up front for me. And in addition to my rent, I paid her monthly installments to pay the floor back. It was a great in-kind trade. We had a contract, first real contract that I'd written up. But Andrea also had a stage in the room that she wanted to use for her dance programs. And I was like, yes, collaboration, let's do it. First time they held a program, they put about 100 chairs across my mats. And then, I don't know if you know this, but the mats are a little soft because we fall on them. So then when you sit in the chair, it puts these wonderful little circle indents. So I come back in the next day before class, and there's about, 400 little dents all over my brand new floor that I haven't even actually paid off yet. So facility management was something that I never considered to be a resource that I had to put time into, right? I didn't think about risk management plans. I didn't think about maintenance schedules. I didn't think about the care of this floor other than, I'll vacuum it and then once a month I'll sanitize and mop it, right? So then I had to kind of step back and think, okay, this is actually a shared space. How do you negotiate a shared space so that people are getting what they need, but that when we're hosting classes, it feels like a martial arts gym? I didn't want it to feel like a multi-purpose studio. So we've been partnering with Andrea Schaefer for about 2 years now. And it has been an amazing partnership. There's been lots of bumps, like the floor, lots of bumps where we've double scheduled the room and I show up to do a black belt class and she shows up to do an aerial class. We've had a lot of scheduling things to figure out, but what it has done is it has put like-minded individuals together. So if I were to say all of you could be martial artists, what would you say? How many of you were like, no, not me? Okay, some of you are like, no, I don't want to be, or that's not me, or I'm not flexible enough, I can't jump, whatever it might be. I found out that through this, a lot of people don't think of themselves as being capable of learning martial arts, or there's a stigmatization about who can train the martial arts. So by putting a martial arts gym next to a dance studio, how many of you know a dancer? Know someone who has a kid that dances? How many of you know someone who's a martial artist? Okay, a couple, but not a lot. It put us in the same visual market as dance and said we are just as legitimate, we are just as open, and in fact, we started to get families that would have one kid that would register for dance and the other kid would register for martial arts. So it was really amazing to be like, the people that I'm with, the people that the places that we're seen with make a difference on how the community sees us. Then I started to be like, okay, I'm an artist, I know some graphic design. We actually have to market stuff. Our kids' classes, they go like gangbusters. Our adults' classes, a little harder to sell. So I had to start thinking like a creative again and say, how do I market this? Well, I've got a 20-year-old black belt who is impervious and made of steel and can do anything, right? Because he's never been hurt. So he's not afraid of anything. Me, I'm afraid of stuff. So I don't do a lot of flips like this. So I started being like, okay, well, let's just do a photo shoot. Let's have you come in. Let's have you do some flips. We'll do the photos ourselves. There's really free and easy, accessible online design stuff where you can design things with templates if you're not a designer. And then we'll just start doing some Facebook stuff. And some photos. I realized that Facebook is great, but when you want to start taking yourself seriously as a business, you have to start doing things that other businesses in the career field are doing. So one of the things that I realized through some of the research is martial arts gyms' websites generally suck. They do. I don't know. They're like stuck in the 80s or something. They're horrible. They're not contemporary. They don't show students that are in their gym. They're all stock photos. So when you go onto the site, if it's hard to navigate, you're not going to sign up or do anything. If you look at the site and you don't see yourself as being represented in the community, you're not going to go there. So I was like, wow, I actually have to take photos of the students that I actually have in my classes in our actual facility. So when people go to our website, they're going to see exactly what they get when they show up. So this is one of the ads that we created for that. And I use Adobe Spark. I have an Adobe Creative Cloud software for free through my MFA degree. Thank you, higher education. So that's what I use, but there's tons of them that you can use online for free. Okay, so we have this great new partnership. We have an awesome new website that took me 6 months to build on my own. It was a long time. It was not a lot of fun. And I was like, okay, we're doing great. The outside matches the inside matches the outside, but we need more connections. We need other organizations that have access to kids and parents who support lifelong learning and want to help create connections in our community, because that was what was important to me. So we started looking at festivals and booths and partnerships. Who are people that have similar missions that we might benefit from a relationship? So this is actually at, I think, the Rapid City Arts Council's Chaos Makers Fair a couple of years ago that they did like one-off and done. And we did a Korean cultural craft. Our martial arts comes from South Korea, so we do a lot of language development. We do a lot of cultural history and oral tradition, and they have hacky sacks recorded from like the farthest back that they have documentation, which is like an oil painting from the 1700s. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Let's make some hacky sacks. So that's what we did. Super simple. I'm trying to weave the visual arts and the martial arts together, but really those are all just tools to build relationships in our community. Then I lucked out by meeting one of the education specialists at Rural America Initiatives, and they have their Auwerter programs, which do amazing things by giving kids opportunities that they might not have on their own. We were able to secure a grant. They wrote it. We supplied information. And for a year, we had every single elementary Auwerter kid come into the martial arts gym for free classes. I saw over 400 kids in that gym. Now, they weren't coming back repeat, but I was able to pay black belts to become staff members to help facilitate that program. And that might not seem a lot, but if you've never hired an employee yet, let me tell you, there are a lot of hidden fees with having employees. Workers' compensation, unemployment taxes. Also, you have to pay them so much money before you can register online to actually file the proper taxes. So you have to do these really slightly weird phone calls with the Department of Labor. So there was lots of things I had no idea how to do. And I hired an accountant. And this is the second biggest mistake that I ever made. I had no idea what to look for in an accountant. I just thought, someone needs to know numbers better than me because my 2-column Excel document is not working anymore, right? I was paying taxes, but I didn't know I was supposed to track things like mileage for the business, meals. I didn't know how to code things properly. And so I hired this part-time woman who was starting her own business. She switched us to an LLC, a limited liability company. It is technically still single member owned, so we are taxed as a sole proprietor, but there is some separation between myself personally and Full Circle, which is one of the best decisions that I've ever made so far. But we hired this woman. She got our account set up. I use QuickBooks Online. I love it. This is not a plug for them. They are not giving me money. But if they want to, they can. And I thought we were good to go. We ran this way for about 3 years, and then my accountant vanished. Just vanished off the face of the earth. I didn't know how to run the software. I didn't know where the numbers were. So I'm using TurboTax to file my taxes. And I don't know how to do taxes very well other than click the boxes that they give me. And I end up going to Cadel Thorstensen, hiring them, and I found out that for 3 years I was paying state tax but not city tax. So I had 3 years of back taxes I now had to pay. And when you're a really small business, we make under $100,000 a year, way under. That's a lot of money to pay up front. And the only reason why I found out is because one of my adult students works with the Department of Revenue. And he happened to see our account pass his desk and notice that there was like a check mark on it. And he called me and said, Master Naomi, I don't know if you know this. This is not an official call, but you haven't been paying city tax. I was like, what? Yeah, I have. I click boxes. So I hired a better accountant. I asked for certifications. I asked for licenses. I asked questions like, what is your pricing structure for small businesses? This is approximately how much we make. This is approximately what I think I can afford per month. What services are more important? I'm new. Can you train me and teach me? And they said yes. So we get our accounting fixed. We pay all these back taxes, and I feel like I've just been run over by a train, but the accounting is fine, right? It's all good. We're in the books now. And a black belt who trains in our association in the Midwest from North Dakota moves to Rapid City and is going to School of Mines. And he's training at our gym, and he goes, Master Naomi, I want to open a club with School of Mines. Okay, how do we do that? So I learned how to write bylaws. I learned how to negotiate with a larger institution because I'm not an employee, staff, alumni, student, or faculty member at the School of Mines. But they need certification in the martial arts. So I had to be a martial arts advisor. But I couldn't write it in a way that gave me any power in the bylaws because they don't want to give outside people power. So I had to find a way to negotiate so that I could be in a mentor position for the school. The college club sees anywhere between 5 to 50 kids in a semester go through that program. And my job is to show up and teach the higher ranking students how to be better educators. How do you teach students? What happens when you have a student that comes in and they're really excited, but this is their flexibility. This is where they're at. How do you help them learn? How do you work with a student who might have slower processing time? How do you work with a student who comes in with an amputated leg? That one's pretty fun. They can throw some wicked kicks with that amputated leg and it breaks lots of boards. They think that's cool. So this is my last slide, but through all of this, it was all sort of accidental. I think there was only really one point in my journey where I said, this is what I want to do. And it's because it was less stressful than this job behind the desk here. That's not true anymore. I still love what I do. It is still stressful, but it's because I care so much about it. So the thing that I learned the most up to this point is you have to ask questions about things you don't know. And that seems a little counterintuitive, but if you don't know accounting, say, I don't know accounting. Does anybody know accounting better or someone that I can talk to figure out what questions I need to know in order to find the person who can help me? Because it's not just saying, I need an accountant. Oh, you're an accountant, I'm gonna hire you. We might not know each other yet. We might not be a good fit. If I don't know something, then I can't ask the questions to find the right fit. So you have to be honest. There's lots of mistakes that I made. When I was putting this together, I wrote a list of all the ones that I could remember, and it was like 2 pages long. I was like, that's not a 6-minute presentation. The other thing that I looked into when I was doing, I think a lot of us do this, is we have small business. We have a couple of people that do like entrepreneurial stuff, like very specifically. No idea you existed when I was going through this. And I think a lot of us run into that because this happens so organically. It's not necessarily, I'm going to branch out and do my own thing. It's sort of like I'm doing my own thing at the same time I'm doing this full-time thing. So we don't necessarily devote the research time to finding the resources that might make this process a little bit smoother. So do your research. And that is full circle in my presentation. Hopefully you don't make the same flooring mistake I do.
I'll start. I'm Leah Braun with Nsight Partners. Just wondering what's next for you. You've done a lot of changes and made some moves and et cetera. So what's next?
That's a great question. So Andrea Schaefer, Barefoot Dance Studio, purchased one of the old Landstrom's factory buildings over by the Gap, that big long white one. We actually just finished moving over there. We're opening up a second studio space, so we can help smaller martial arts studios have a space to sublet to kind of start building their own programming. And I am actually working with Pennington County to develop a juvenile diversion program that takes first-time nonviolent offenders between the ages of 12 and 18 and allows them to come to the martial arts studio for continued cultural and physical training as part of their court-mandated community hours. So we're in the process of developing curriculum for that. I was told to create a risk management plan, and then my question was, what the heck's a risk management plan? How is that different than what I do for the business versus this program? So I'm now in the process of connecting with the right people to figure out, how do I create a risk management committee? Which seems easy, but it's not easy. So that's kind of the next big step, is to get the new facility finalized, finished, get everybody moved in, and then to really focus on this new program that we're adding in. So yeah. That's my
got a question. Deanna, Becket, character coach. I know your background is both arts and martial arts.
No, that's an amazing question. So it was about the part, so we left the Roosevelt Swim Center after being there for about a year and a half. So this is about 2013, 2014. And we had just moved into our new facility. And as a student myself, I went to a black belt training in Minnesota where the Grandmasters were at. And my instructor always trained me that the male students and the women students are not different. Unless you ask for a modification, you're all expected to do the same thing. So I trained hard. And I went to this training, and I had always been one of the female black belts that could kind of get away with doing harder training because I wanted it. And I was partnered with another female black belt who did not train hard, which was fine. That was how she wanted to train. So I would do my action with her. And then when she was done, I would walk across the gym to where the male partners were, and I would grab a black belt that was lower ranked than me. And I'd be like, okay, we're going to do this back and forth. We do it back and forth a couple times. I'd get thrown really hard, which is what I'm trained for. I didn't have a problem with it. And one of the grandmasters, who is like a grandfather to me, looked at me and said, Naomi, get back to your corner. And I was so mad that someone that I respected would look at me and say, you're not the same as the other people in this room. You have a side and a place. I was so mad that I was like, I have to do something. So I registered for an MFA program because I saw myself as an artist, not necessarily martial arts and visual arts together, but I was like, I'm an artist. And in my MFA program, I was trying to do all of this work that was like feminism, and it was like 1950s housewives, because I thought these images were really cool. And my advisor asked me, he goes, well, this work is beautiful, Naomi, but it doesn't look like you. It doesn't feel like you, sound like you. Like, where are you at in your artwork? And I was like, wow, I don't know, I just put stuff together. And he asked me what I did for a living. And this is right after I stepped away from my full-time job. I said, I'm a martial artist. He's like, well, that's not soft. What are you doing? Why aren't you exploring that? So it took someone giving me permission to come back into my martial arts studio with a completely different eye. So the very first project I did that integrated them together is I built this weird contraption in the roof of our studio, and I mounted a camera. And during class time, I took a photo for every second for the first 15 minutes and then layered the photos over top of each other. And then I showed it to the students. And it looks really abstract, but the students were looking at it, trying to pick themselves out. And then they were saying, oh, I do this technique and my hand comes this way, but sometimes my hand comes out. So they were like starting to critique themselves and see themselves in a different perspective. And that's kind of when I realized that my artistic process is actually the process it takes to create a gym and a space where people connect. It's the relationship building. So the physical work that I create is just like tracings or examples of how that happens, like the outcomes. So like really, this is my art. My martial arts studio is my art as an individual, but also as a community builder, because the way that I cultivate culture in the space is what allows those relationships to be really strong. So that's how I kind of convoluted, but that's how I kind of figured it out. Is someone asked me, like just straight up asked me, and I was like, I don't know. And then they were really hard at the program because it's independent study. So you're there for 10 days and they basically fill your head so full that you feel like you're going to pass out. And then they send you home and you do all your work here in your community. So I would come back with all these questions. Then I would take the questions into the gym. I'd record things and I'd take sound pictures and I'd do interviews and I'd collect all this data. And then I would just sort of like go through it and find the pieces that were really cool and then bring them back and show other people. So great question. Thank you. So when I was in the fellowship, I did not do a business plan because they had some specific goals with what we had to go through. It was very much first stages. So they're like, you kind of have to figure out who you are first before you know how to do this. It was maybe a year later when we actually switched to an LLC that I sat down and actually wrote a real business plan. And I don't think this is cheating, but I went online and I Googled templates. And I found a template that I liked as an example the best and used that to model my first business plan off of. And then I sent it out to other people that I trusted and knew and had them review it and look at it. And then I edited it from there. It's a good starting business plan. 2 years later, I'm looking at expanding our business plan now that we're in this new facility because we have some options we didn't have before. But I use it like a checklist for myself. Am I doing what I said I was going to do? Am I making the steps that I need to? Because in the martial arts, our growth plan is very different. If you think about like a gymnastics studio or a dance studio, what happens if your classes are really full and you have an open space? You hire another instructor, you open up another class, right? Martial arts certifications are not that flexible. You have to train in my facility or one of our sister facilities for a minimum of 1 year before you get your black belt. Then you can maybe teach. And even then, you might not actually be someone who would be a really good fit for the class that's needed. So we grow really small because we have to grow with our instructors. Most of our instructors are School of Mines students. So what happens in 4 years when they graduate? They move. So I'm constantly having to reteach people how to be instructors. So we can't grow super big too fast, but we can open up opportunities that allow other people to kind of come in and share space, and then their growth helps support our growth, and our growth helps support theirs. So the business plan that we're working on now is kind of taking a look at that and saying, how do I make sense of what this new option looks like? But yeah, it was several years afterwards, and even when I was writing it, I was like, I don't know if this is right. So now I got all these people who I can be like, hey, is this right? You might know. But yeah, good question. Thank you.
I just have a simple question. That you have 2 locations,
Sorry. We actually just have 1 location now. Yep, our address is 412 Oshkosh Street. So we're kind of behind Dunn Brothers and Office Max there. So our trial program is no longer in operation because of political decisions at IHS. Eventually, we'd love to go back out there someday, but funding is really kind of tricky when you're working with government agencies that have lots of contentions with other government agencies. So just the one, but we do travel programs. We do a lot of self-defense workshops. So the farthest that we've traveled so far is we go out to winter every year, and with their EMT cadets, we do like a safety and rural self-defense prevention workshop with them. So we do travel some in my tiny little car.
Are there still 26 competitors? Or?
No, the last survey, and actually this is, I do a survey every year, not as in-depth as the first one, but there's actually only like 20 or 19 right now. A couple of them are on the fence because they have like social media presence, but when you go to the address that's on the website, they're not there. So either they moved or they've closed down, or I don't know. So there's less and less, and I think it's because the martial arts studios that are asking themselves the hard questions and actually being reflective of the community are starting to make more changes, and they become more quality institutions that you want to work with. So you're seeing more and more kids go there, and less go to some of the other ones that are a little bit more like a side project. So, and that's partly why we opened up a second space, because some of the side project gyms have really great instructors, have really great curriculum. They're just in the spot that I used to be in, going, how do I do this with a full-time job? Here's a great way to do this. You don't have to take on full responsibility. You just do what you can. And then you use kind of our front as a way to help create some legitimacy and some stability. So at least that's the hope.
I have a silly question.
Yeah.
Did your floor recover?
Yeah. The great thing is it's reversible. So when we moved to the new location, everything got flipped over. Right? When we were in the old space, it was mostly red squares up with a couple blue. So now it's mostly blue up with a couple red. So that was kind of nice, but a little bit of a panic moment. I was like, I don't even own these yet. How do I approach this, what seemed to me like a really big issue? And she didn't even know, because it can't happen again. How do we do that? So it's okay. And we've purchased more floor now, so flooring doesn't seem like as big of a purchase to me as it did then. A little bit of that perspective. It's kind of nice. Yeah, it's like I walked in and I was like, just stood there.
Dunn was me. But how did you keep your? I mean, for you that was the end of the world right there. How did you keep the? I mean, that's still a good relationship. How did that not just blow apart?
So when I was here at the Rhapsody Arts Council, Pepper Massey was the executive director, and she taught me a really valuable lesson. When you are really upset, do not meet right then. So I called my landlord and said, hey, I have an issue with the flooring. Can we set up a meeting? And I picked like a couple days later so we can talk about it. Because then it allowed me those 2 days to like vent to my husband and be like, rah! And then after a day and a half, realize it is a big deal, but it was not intentional. It was not malicious. It's not necessarily the end of the world. Our business relationship is more important to maintain than just having pristine, perfect floors. We can still train on the floors. We can have a conversation about what this means financially, because she technically owned the flooring at that point and I was paying for it, but I didn't want to pay full price for flooring that was now damaged and unusable on one side, because the mats have to be replaced at a certain point. So I was able to do research on like mat care, how long you can use it, if the mats over time will relax and those dents will come out. And then we were able to negotiate. She ended up paying for like carpet remnants that we would pull down and roll out and cover the mats when she needed to use the stage. And so that seemed great. And then we started having scheduling issues because we'd roll the mats out. And then she'd ask me like 30 minutes before to roll them out, and it would take 3 people to do this. So then we had another conversation about, okay, we can facilitate this compromise, but in order to facilitate it, we need X amount of notice. So it was just a lot of like, okay, step back. I feel like I have to, like, my personality is I need to vent. I need to get it out. So that's what my husband's for. I go home and I'm just like, people, the world, whatever I say. And he's like, yeah, okay, Naomi, you're fine. Figure it out. And then the next day I have the conversation because it's giving me a chance to get it out of my system and talk about it more rationally. So, thanks, Pepper. Because she called me a bulldozer. She's like, kind of a bulldozer, Naomi. Because I never used to take breaks. I would just go into the meetings and yeah. So you don't want to be a bulldozer.
Like Ray Rock talks, I'm curious, what is your marketing strategy been? You talked about a little bit here and there, but overall.
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was whatever the heck I could do. It was like a Facebook page. I'm really lucky in that my husband is a graphic designer. He does videography and he's a writer. He's done a lot of like marketing work. And as a visual artist, I have some of those skills. So my first marketing strategy is we have to have a clear logo that separates us. Like we have to have a good logo, and that logo has to go on lots of things, even if it's just digitally, because then it creates a brand identity that people start to recognize with our business. So we created a logo. You'll see our Minds Martial Arts one. We've updated it. Our new one is just like that, only it's red and blue and says Full Circle Martial Arts. So any of the gyms that we have the same looking logo, so it creates brand identity. We have a website where all of the photos on our website are action photos from our gym, so that they're as realistic and representative as possible. And again, I luck out because we have photography skills. So I don't necessarily have to hire someone. However, we do work with a lot of parents and students at our gym. I do have one parent right now who is also a professional photographer. So a lot of time we do like in-kind exchange. If she does some photo sessions for us, we figure out like what that would cost, and we take that off of tuition for a couple of months for her. So we do a lot of things like that, which is really great to help support them and then get them some portfolio development. And then I do a lot of posting on Facebook. We do a lot of newsletters. I use MailChimp for a monthly newsletter that goes out. And then we actually, if you're an education-based place, this is one of the best things that I've ever gotten in. It's called the YEP booklet, Youth Education Providers Booklet. The Rapid City Arts Council hosts it. They don't make any money off of it. Not really. But this goes to every elementary age student in the Rapid City School District. Every single one of them. So we do this. We've been doing a couple of different ads in like Black Hills Parent Magazine. We do a couple of e-blasts with them, but really, word of mouth is by far the best marketing strategy we have. We make little handouts, we give them to the kiddos, and we invite a friend. And we do like, most martial arts gyms don't do this, and I found it's been really amazing for us. Everybody gets one free class trial. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter when you come into the gym, your first class is free, because then you're more likely to come try it without expectations because you have nothing invested in it. And then we're usually able to find better fits for students that way. So that's kind of our strategy right now. I am not like a marketing strategy genius. I just kind of do tried and true tested. But we are working on branching out a little bit more when my husband has time.